Lonely rancher, asked the Apache girl forbidden to love, "Will you be my wife?" The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked earth of the McAllister ranch, turning the once fertile grazing land into a monument to despair. Samuel McAllister stood on his weathered porch, his calloused hands gripping the wooden railing as he surveyed the devastation that had become his life. The drought had lasted 8 months now, and his cattle, what remained of them, stood like skeletal shadows against the barren landscape, their ribs visible beneath sun-bleached hides. At 32, Sam carried the weight of a man twice his age. His auburn hair, once thick and vibrant, had begun to thin at the temples, and deep lines etched his weathered face like canyons carved by years of disappointment. The blue eyes that had once sparkled with the hope of a young immigrant from County Cork now held the dull resignation of a man who had watched his dreams die one by one. Another one down by the creek bed, called out Miguel Santos, his last remaining ranch hand, as he approached the house leading his weary horse. The Mexican man's face was grim beneath his wide-brimmed hat. "That makes 6 this week, Patron." Sam nodded slowly, feeling each word like a physical blow. 6 more cattle lost to the drought, 6 more reasons why the bank would come calling again. He could still hear the condescending tone of Mr. Whitmore, the banker from Tucson, who had visited just last week with papers that might as well have been a death sentence for the ranch. "We'll bury it tomorrow," Sam said quietly, his Irish accent still faintly coloring his words despite 15 years in Arizona territory. "Can't afford to lose any more to the scavengers." Miguel removed his hat and wiped the sweat from his brow. "Patron, perhaps it is time to consider Senor Whitmore's offer. The railroad company, they pay good money for this land." The suggestion hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Sam had heard it before, from Miguel, from the few neighbors who still spoke to him, from the voice in his own head during the long, sleepless nights. The railroad wanted his land for a new route to California, and they were willing to pay enough to clear his debts and leave him with a small sum to start over somewhere else. But this land held more than just memories of failed crops and dead cattle. It held the grave of his wife, Sarah, who had died 3 years ago from fever, taking with her not just his heart but his unborn child. It held the dreams they had shared of building something lasting in this harsh but beautiful territory. Leaving would mean abandoning the only connection he had left to the woman who had given meaning to his existence. "I'll think about it," Sam replied, though both men knew he had already made his decision long ago. As Miguel headed to the barn to tend to his horse, Sam remained on the porch watching the sun begin its descent toward the jagged mountains that lined the horizon. The silence was broken only by the distant cry of a hawk and the whisper of wind through the dried grass. This was the loneliness that ate at him more than any financial worry, the profound isolation of a man who had lost everything that mattered. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew his attention to the dusty trail that led to town. A single rider approached, moving with the easy grace of someone born to the saddle. As the figure drew closer, Sam could make out the distinctive silhouette of Tom Bradley, the sheriff of Sunset Ridge, the small town 10 miles to the east. Tom was a good man, one of the few who had stood by Sam after Sarah's death, but his visits these days rarely brought good news. The sheriff's weathered face was serious as he dismounted and tied his horse to the porch rail. "Evening, Sam," Tom said, touching the brim of his hat. "Mind if I sit a spell?" "Course not," Sam replied, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. "You look like you've got something heavy on your mind." Tom settled into the chair with a sigh that spoke of long days and difficult decisions. "I do indeed. There's been some trouble south of here near the Apache reservation. Some of the tribal leaders are getting restless, talking about broken promises and stolen land." Sam felt a familiar knot form in his stomach. Relations between the white settlers and the Apache had been tense for years, punctuated by periods of violence that left both sides bloodied and bitter. What kind of trouble? Cattle rustling mostly, but also reports of warriors leaving the reservation without permission. The territorial government is talking about sending in more troops. Tom paused, studying Sam's face. "I wanted to warn you. Your ranch is isolated out here, and if things get bad, I appreciate the concern, Tom, but I'm not running from Apache any more than I'm running from the bank." Sam's voice carried a quiet determination that had seen him through countless hardships. "This is my land, bought and paid for with honest work. I'll defend it if I have to." Tom nodded, understanding the stubborn pride that kept men like Sam anchored to their chosen ground even when wisdom suggested retreat. Just be careful, my friend. Keep your rifle close and your eyes open. These are changing times, and not all changes are for the better. As the sheriff prepared to leave, he paused at the edge of the porch. Sam, you know you don't have to face all this alone. There are people in town who would help if you'd let them. Sam managed a bitter smile. The same people who cross the street when they see me coming? The ones who whisper about the crazy Irishman who talks to his dead wife's grave? People grieve in their own ways, Tom said gently. But grief can become a prison if you let it. Sarah wouldn't want that for you. After Tom rode away, Sam remained on the porch as darkness crept across the land. The temperature began to drop, bringing slight relief from the day's heat but no relief from the weight of his thoughts. In the distance, a coyote howled, a sound that seemed to echo the emptiness in his soul. He thought about Tom's words, about the Apache troubles brewing to the south, about the bank's ultimatum, about the grave beneath the cottonwood tree where he spent too many evenings talking to a woman who could no longer answer. The loneliness was like a physical ache, a constant reminder of how thoroughly life had stripped away everything he had once held dear. Tomorrow would bring another day of fighting the drought, another day of watching his dreams crumble like the parched earth beneath his feet. But tonight, as the first stars appeared in the vast Arizona sky, Sam McAllister sat alone with his memories and wondered if a man could die from loneliness long before his heart stopped beating. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of distant rain that might never come, and Sam closed his eyes, trying to remember what hope felt like. The next morning brought no relief from the oppressive heat, and Sam found himself riding toward the southern boundary of his property to check on a water source that had been drying up for weeks. The small spring nestled between two red sandstone formations had been his last hope for keeping his remaining cattle alive, but as he approached, his heart sank. The once reliable trickle had reduced to little more than damp earth and cracked mud. Sam dismounted and knelt beside the dying spring, running his fingers through the moist soil. This was it, the final nail in the coffin of his ranching dreams. Without water, his cattle would be dead within days, and the bank would foreclose before the month was out. He sat back on his heels, staring at the barren landscape that stretched endlessly in all directions. It was then that he heard it, a sound that made him freeze. Singing, soft and melodic, carried on the desert wind. The voice was unmistakably feminine, hauntingly beautiful, and completely out of place in this desolate wilderness. Sam reached for his rifle, not out of aggression, but from the ingrained caution that kept men alive in Apache territory. Following the sound, he moved carefully through the maze of red rocks, his boots silent on the sandy ground. As he rounded a large boulder, the singing stopped abruptly, and he found himself face to face with the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She stood beside a hidden pool of clear water, her long black hair gleaming in the sunlight, her bronze skin perfect against the backdrop of red stone. She wore traditional Apache dress, a buckskin blouse decorated with intricate beadwork and a flowing skirt that moved like water in the breeze. But it was her eyes that struck him most, dark as midnight but filled with a sadness that seemed to mirror his own. For a moment neither spoke. The woman's hand moved instinctively to a knife at her belt, while Sam kept his rifle lowered but ready. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, heavy with the weight of all the violence and mistrust that had defined relations between their peoples. "I mean no harm," Sam said finally, his voice hoarse from the shock of finding another human being in this remote place. "I was just looking for water." The woman studied him with intelligent eyes, taking in his worn clothes, his weathered face, and the unmistakable loneliness that clung to him like dust. When she spoke, her English was clear and precise, touched with only the faintest accent. "This is Apache land," she said, her voice carrying both warning and weariness. "Your people have no right to be here." "Your people?" Sam repeated, lowering his rifle completely. "I'm not here representing anyone but myself. I'm just a rancher trying to keep his cattle alive." Something in his tone must have reached her, because the rigid tension in her posture relaxed slightly. "You are the Irishman who speaks to the dead," she said, and Sam's surprise must have shown on his face. "Word travels far in the desert. You are Samuel McAllister." "And you are?" Sam asked, though he suspected he already knew. This had to be one of the Apache from the reservation. possibly one of the troublemakers Sheriff Bradley had warned him about. "I am Ayana," she replied, the name rolling off her tongue like music. "It means eternal blossom in my language, though I think the name no longer fits me." There was such profound sadness in her words that Sam found himself stepping closer, drawn by a recognition of pain that matched his own. "Why do you say that?" Ayana looked away, her gaze settling on the clear water that bubbled up from deep within the earth. "Because I am no longer welcome among my people. I am cast out, forbidden to return." "What did you do?" "I refused to marry the man chosen for me," she said simply. "Nalnish is a warrior, strong and respected, but his heart is filled with hatred for all white people. He beats his horses and would beat his wife. When I said no, the council decided I was too influenced by the white man's ways. They said I had forgotten what it means to be Apache." Sam felt a surge of anger on her behalf. "So they just threw you out? Left you to die in the desert?" "They gave me a choice," Ayana replied, her voice steady despite the pain beneath it. "Marry Nalnish, or leave forever. I chose to leave." She looked back at him, and Sam saw a strength in her that reminded him of the desert itself, harsh, unforgiving, but undeniably beautiful. "I have been living in these rocks for 2 weeks, drinking from this spring, eating what the land provides." "That's no life," Sam said, surprising himself with his vehemence. "A woman shouldn't have to live like that just because she won't be forced into marriage. And a man shouldn't have to live alone, talking to ghosts," Ayana replied gently. "But this is the world we have been given." Her words hit him like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Here was someone who understood the weight of isolation, the burden of being cast out from the only community you had ever known. In her dark eyes, he saw his own loneliness reflected back at him. "This spring," Sam said, gesturing to the water, "it's on the edge of my property. Technically, it's on my land." "Your people's papers mean nothing to the water," Ayana said, but without hostility. "It flows where it will, belongs to whoever needs it most." "Then we both need it," Sam said, making a decision that would change both their lives. "And maybe we don't both have to be alone." The words hung between them, dangerous and full of possibility. Both of them knew what he was suggesting, not just sharing water, but sharing companionship, maybe even something more. In 1880s Arizona, such a thing was not just forbidden, but potentially deadly. "You do not know what you are saying," Ayana said, though her voice lacked conviction. "I am Apache. You are white. There is no place in this world for what you suggest." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Sam replied, his voice gaining strength. "I'm saying that I'm tired of being alone, and I think you are too. I'm saying that maybe two people who've been cast out by their worlds can make a world of their own." Ayana stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she knelt beside the spring and cupped the clear water in her hands, offering it to him. "Drink," she said simply. Sam knelt beside her, their shoulders almost touching, and drank from her cupped hands. The water was cool and sweet, the first thing that had tasted like hope in longer than he could remember. When he finished, he cupped his own hands and offered the water to her, watching as she drank with the same reverence. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now," Sam said, "we figure out how to survive. Together." As they sat beside the hidden spring, two outcasts from different worlds, neither could have imagined the challenges that lay ahead. But for the first time in years, neither felt entirely alone. Over the following weeks, Sam and Ayana developed a careful routine that allowed them to spend time together, while avoiding the eyes of both the townspeople and any Apache who might be searching for her. Sam would ride out each morning to check his cattle, always taking a route that led him past the hidden spring where Ayana had made her temporary home among the red rocks. She had fashioned a small shelter from branches and her own blankets, invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly where to look. Sam brought her supplies: coffee, flour, bacon, blankets, always careful to make it seem like he was simply camping out on his own land. In return, she shared her knowledge of the desert, showing him which plants could provide nourishment and medicine, teaching him to read the signs that predicted weather changes. "Your cattle are dying because you're fighting the land instead of working with it," she told him one afternoon as they sat in the shade of a towering saguaro cactus. "The Apache have lived here for generations. We know where the water flows underground, where the grass grows sweetest, where the animals come to drink. Sam watched as she sketched a map in the sand, marking locations with small stones. Her hands moved with graceful precision, and he found himself studying her face as she concentrated. Over the past month, he had come to know every expression, every gesture, every subtle change in her voice. The loneliness that had been eating him alive was slowly being replaced by something he had thought he would never feel again. Love. There, she said, pointing to a spot on her sand map. 2 miles north of here, there is a place where the water runs just beneath the surface. The Apache call it Whispering Earth, because you can hear the stream if you listen carefully. Why are you helping me? Sam asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Ayanna looked up at him, her dark eyes reflecting the same warmth he felt growing in his own heart. Because you looked at me as a person, not as an enemy. Because you offered to share your loneliness instead of demanding that I ease it. That evening, as the sun painted the desert sky in shades of gold and crimson, Sam finally found the courage to speak the words that had been growing in his heart. They were sitting by the spring, sharing a simple meal of beans and hardtack, when he reached over and gently touched her hand. Ayanna, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I know this is impossible. I know the world will never accept us. But I have to ask. He paused, struggling with words that could change everything. Will you be my wife? The question hung between them like a prayer offered to an uncertain God. Ayanna's eyes filled with tears, but whether they were tears of joy or sorrow, Sam couldn't tell. Samuel, she whispered, using his full name for the first time. You know what you are asking, you know what it would mean. I know it would mean everything to me, he replied, his thumb gently stroking her hand. I know it would mean facing hatred and violence and maybe death, but I also know that I love you, and I can't imagine facing whatever time I have left without you. Ayanna closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, Sam saw his answer in their depths. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I will be your wife. They were married 3 days later in a ceremony that belonged to neither of their traditions, but to something entirely their own. Standing beside the spring that had brought them together, with only the desert as witness, they spoke vows that came from their hearts rather than any book or ritual. I promise to stand with you against whatever comes, Sam said, his hands holding hers as the setting sun painted them both in golden light. I promise to love you not despite our differences, but because of them. I promise to be your partner in all things, Ayanna replied, her voice steady and sure. I promise to help you build a life that honors both our peoples even if neither will have us. They sealed their promises with a kiss that tasted of hope and defiance, 2 souls joining together in the face of a world that would try to tear them apart. Their happiness, however, was short-lived. The very next morning, as Sam was preparing to ride out to check on his cattle, Miguel came racing toward the house, his face pale with fear. Patron, he called out, leaping from his horse before it had fully stopped. Apache warriors, they come this way, many of them painted for war. Sam's blood turned to ice. He had always known this moment might come, but the reality of it hit him like a physical blow. How many? 8, maybe 10, Miguel replied, his voice shaking. They ride hard, looking for something. Or someone. Sam's mind raced. If the Apache were coming this way, it could only mean one thing. They were searching for Ayanna. Somehow they had discovered where she was hiding, and they were coming to take her back. Or worse. Miguel, take the spare horse and ride to town, Sam ordered, his voice calm despite the terror in his heart. Find Sheriff Bradley and tell him what's happening. But Patron, you cannot face them alone. Go, Sam commanded, and Miguel reluctantly obeyed, mounting his horse and riding toward town as fast as his animal could carry him. Sam ran to the hidden spring, his heart pounding with fear for the woman he had just married. He found Ayanna already packing her few belongings, her face set in lines of grim determination. You know? He asked. I heard the horses, she replied without looking up. Nalnish has come for me. He will not accept that I chose exile over marriage to him. Then we run, Sam said, reaching for her hand. We'll take the horses and head for California. Start over somewhere, they'll never find us. Ayanna shook her head sadly. There is nowhere we can run that will be far enough, and if we run, innocent people will die. Your friend Miguel, Sheriff Bradley, perhaps others. Nalnish's anger burns like wildfire. It consumes everything in its path. Then what do we do? Before Ayana could answer, the sound of approaching horses echoed off the canyon walls. They had run out of time. Sam pulled his rifle from its scabbard and checked the ammunition, while Ayana placed her hand on the knife at her belt. "Whatever happens," Sam said, looking into her eyes, "remember that I love you. Remember that for one perfect moment, we were happy." "I will remember," she promised, and then the Apache warriors appeared, their horses thundering around the bend in a cloud of dust and fury. At their head rode a man who could only be Nalnish, tall, powerfully built, his face painted with white and black stripes that made him look like death itself. His eyes, when they fixed on Ayana, burned with a hatred that seemed to encompass not just her betrayal but everything she represented. "Ayana!" he called out in Apache, his voice carrying clearly across the canyon. "You have shamed yourself and your people long enough. Come with us now and perhaps the council will show mercy." "I have chosen my path," Ayana replied, stepping forward to stand beside Sam. "I will not be forced into marriage with a man whose heart knows only hatred." Nalnish's eyes shifted to Sam, and the hatred in them intensified. "So it is true. You have given yourself to this white dog, this enemy of our people." "He is not my enemy," Ayana said firmly. "He is my husband." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap, and Sam saw several of the warriors reach for their weapons. This was the moment that would determine whether they lived or died, whether love could triumph over hatred, or whether the prejudices of their time would destroy them both. Nalnish raised his lance, his face twisted with rage, and Sam knew that the battle for their love and their lives was about to begin. The silence that followed Ayana's declaration stretched like a bowstring about to snap. Nalnish sat motionless on his warhorse, his lance raised while the other warriors spread out in a semicircle, effectively trapping Sam and Ayana against the canyon wall. The only sounds were the heavy breathing of the horses and the whisper of wind through the rocks. "Husband," Nalnish repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "You dare to call this white devil your husband? Have you forgotten who you are, woman? Have you forgotten the blood of your ancestors that flows in your veins?" "I have forgotten nothing," Ayana replied, her voice steady despite the mortal danger they faced. "I remember that my grandmother taught me to judge a man by his actions, not the color of his skin. I remember that our people once lived in peace with others who showed them respect." "Peace?" Nalnish laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Tell me about peace when the white man's soldiers slaughter our children. Tell me about peace when they steal our land and force us onto reservations like cattle in a pen." Sam had remained silent, knowing that any words from him would only fuel the warrior's rage. But as he watched the hatred burning in Nalnish's eyes, he realized that this confrontation was about more than just Ayana's refusal to marry. It was about years of accumulated pain, broken promises, and the slow death of a proud people. "You're right," Sam said quietly, lowering his rifle. "My people have done terrible things to yours. I can't defend that, and I won't try to." The unexpected admission seemed to surprise Nalnish, who had clearly expected defiance or denial. "Then you admit you are our enemy?" "I admit that I'm one man who's trying to live his life without hurting anyone," Sam replied. "I admit that I found a woman who was alone and afraid, and I offered her protection. I admit that I fell in love with her and she with me. If that makes me your enemy, then so be it." "Love," Nalnish spat. "You speak of love while your people murder mine. You speak of love while you steal our women and corrupt them with your white man's poison." "I stole nothing," Sam said, his voice gaining strength. "Ayana chose to leave your people because she refused to be forced into a marriage with a man who would treat her as property. She chose to be with me because I offered her something you never did: respect." The words hit Nalnish like a physical blow, and Sam saw the warrior's grip tighten on his lance. But before he could strike, another voice cut through the tension. "Nalnish, hold." The voice belonged to an older Apache man who had been riding slightly behind the others. He was clearly a man of authority, his weathered face marked with the scars of old battles and the wisdom of years. As he urged his horse forward, the other warriors parted respectfully. "Grandfather," Ayana whispered, and Sam realized this must be the tribal elder who had spoken for her when she was cast out. "Ayana, my child," the old man said, his voice heavy with sadness. "Look what has become of you, living like an animal in the rocks, mating with our enemies. He is not my enemy, grandfather, Ayanna replied, tears streaming down her face. He is a good man who offered me kindness when my own people turned their backs on me. A good man? Nalnish interjected, his voice rising to a shout. He is white. That alone makes him our enemy. Enough, the elder commanded, and Nalnish fell silent, though his eyes continued to burn with hatred. Ayanna, you were given a choice. You chose exile over marriage to a respected warrior. Now you must live with the consequences. I accept the consequences, Ayanna said, moving closer to Sam. I choose love over hatred, hope over despair. I choose to build something new, rather than cling to old grievances. The elder's eyes shifted to Sam, studying him with an intensity that seemed to see straight through to his soul. And you, white man, what do you choose? Sam took a deep breath, knowing that his next words might determine not just their fate but the fate of others as well. I choose to stand with the woman I love. I choose to try to bridge the gap between our peoples, even if it costs me everything. Bridge the gap? Nalnish laughed bitterly. There is no bridge across the river of blood your people have spilled. There is only vengeance. Then that's where you're wrong, Sam said, his voice carrying a conviction that surprised even him. There's always a choice between hatred and understanding, between revenge and forgiveness. Maybe I can't change what my people have done, but I can change how I choose to live. The elder continued to study Sam, his ancient eyes unreadable. Finally he spoke. You speak well, white man, but words are easy. What proof do you offer of your intentions? Before Sam could answer, the sound of approaching hoofbeats echoed through the canyon. Sheriff Bradley appeared, leading a group of 6 armed men from town. The situation had just become infinitely more dangerous. Sam, Bradley called out, his rifle ready. Step away from the Apache and we'll handle this. No, Sam shouted, positioning himself between the two groups. There's no need for violence here. No need? One of the townsmen yelled. They've got you surrounded and you're defending them? I'm defending my wife, Sam replied, his words carrying clearly to both groups. The admission hit the white men like a thunderbolt. Sam could see the shock and disgust on their faces, the way they looked at him as if he had become something alien and dangerous. Your wife? Bradley asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sam, tell me you didn't. I married her, Sam said firmly. 3 days ago, by the spring. She's my wife and I'll defend her with my life. The reaction was immediate and violent. The townsmen began shouting about Indian lovers and betrayal of your own kind, while the Apache warriors grew more agitated, sensing the escalating tension. Only the elder remained calm, watching the chaos with sad, knowing eyes. You see, Nalnish said to the elder, even his own people reject him now. This is what comes of trying to bridge the gap between our worlds. Maybe, the elder replied quietly, or maybe this is what courage looks like. The statement stunned everyone into momentary silence. In that brief quiet, Sam made a decision that would echo through the rest of his life. If you want to kill me, he said, addressing both groups, then do it. But know that you'll be killing a man who chose love over hatred, who chose to see beyond the color of a person's skin to the goodness of their heart. Kill me, and you prove that hatred is stronger than love. Let me live, and maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to coexist. The elder looked at Nalnish, then at the white men, then back at Sam and Ayanna. You would die for her? I would, Sam replied without hesitation, just as she would die for me. And if we let you live? What then? Sam took Ayanna's hand, drawing strength from her touch. Then we'll try to build something better. Maybe we'll fail, but at least we'll have tried. The elder nodded slowly, then turned to Nalnish. You have heard his words. What say you, warrior? Nalnish's face was a mask of conflicting emotions, hatred, frustration, and something that might have been grudging respect. I say he is a fool who will die for his foolishness. But, he paused, struggling with words. Perhaps there is honor in such foolishness. Sheriff Bradley stepped forward, his own face reflecting the same internal struggle. Sam, I've known you for years. You're a good man, but this is madness. Maybe, Sam admitted, but it's my madness, Tom, and I choose it freely. As the sun began to set behind the canyon walls, The two groups faced each other across a divide that seemed as wide as the desert itself. But in that moment, something unprecedented happened. The elder dismounted and walked slowly towards Sam and Ayanna, his weathered hands empty of weapons. "I am Ahiga," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years and wisdom. "I have seen much violence in my life, much hatred. Perhaps it is time to see something different." He reached out and placed his hand on Sam's shoulder, then on Ayanna's. "I do not approve of your choice, granddaughter, but I respect your courage to make it. And you, white man, you have shown more honor than many of my own warriors." Sheriff Bradley dismounted as well, his face troubled but resolute. "I don't understand this, Sam, but I've seen enough violence to know that maybe it's time to try something else." As the two leaders stood together, the first tentative bridge across the divide of hatred and mistrust, Sam felt Ayanna's hand squeeze his. They had won something precious, not just their lives, but the possibility of a future where love might triumph over hatred. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges and dangers they could hardly imagine. But they would face it together, two hearts united against a world that would test their love in ways they had yet to discover. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sam McAllister and Ayanna stood hand in hand, knowing that their love had changed something fundamental in the harsh landscape of the Arizona Territory. It was a small change, perhaps, but it was a beginning. And sometimes a beginning is all the world needs to transform itself into something better. What did you think of Sam and Ayanna's incredible love story? Their courage to choose love over hatred in the face of impossible odds shows us that even in the darkest times, hope can prevail. If this story touched your heart and made you believe in the power of love to overcome prejudice, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what moment impacted you the most. Did you feel the tension when the two groups faced off at the canyon? Were you moved by the elders' decision to bridge the divide? Your thoughts and reactions mean everything to me. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss these powerful stories of love, courage, and redemption. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that love always finds a way, even against the greatest odds.